So I'm thrilled now to introduce Sir Ian Taylor to the stage alongside his son Ben Taylor. Now, Sir Ian Taylor is the don't see why not guy. Innovative and creative, he pushes back against binary thinking, leans into what matters most. Fresh, even after years on the tools and in business, this former TV host applied his skills to digital innovation, creating cutting-edge solutions in the Deep South for global broadcast and streaming platforms. He never sits back, always poking and provoking to get solutions and answers to what ails us as a country. You've probably read some of his articles. It's what saw him recognised as a knight in the 2012 New Year's Honours and inducted into the New Zealand Technology Hall of Fame in 2009. He's got lots of honours. Today, Ian's done better than just bring the kid to work day. He's brought Ben, another innovative creation forged in the South at the same time as Ian was launching Animation Research Limited. Where Ian is the don't see why not guy, Ben grew up known as the seek and destroy kid. He is still seeking and disrupting, but in the very best way, to revolutionise the way we consume many of the world's biggest sports events. His bio is way too long to read here, but it is so impressive as to encourage you to read it in the notes. Ben is a dad of 3 who lives with his wife Samantha in Dunedin, the city he's most passionate about, but joins us with Dad Ian here in Tāmaki today. They will be discussing using innovation to tell stories. Please welcome them both, Sir Ian Taylor and Ben Taylor.
Ko moha ka te awa, ko haururu te maunga, ko ngati pāhau were te hapu, ko ngati kāngunu te iwi, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou koutou. Which is just another way of saying I'm just a little Māori fella who was born in 1950 and was brought up in a little place on the east coast of the North Island called Raupunga. Now, when I was growing up here in the 1950s, I could never have imagined one day I'd use a thing called a computer, go to a thing called the internet, to a place called Google Earth, to take you back to the house I was brought up in, without electricity. Mum cooked on a coal-fire range, Dad listened to Life with Dexter on a battery-powered radio, and my brothers and sister and I read Eagle comics by the light of a gas lamp. So that's our beginning. I want to begin this, the theme for this begins with a Māori whakatauki. Ko ngā tahua o tapu wai I nanahi, hei to ira ora mō a popo. So for those of you who are Guy and Espina fans, you will already know what that means. For Mike Hosking fans, I've got a translation. The footsteps we lay down in our past create the paving stones of where we stand today. And the important thing about this whakatauki is that in the Māori worldview, those footsteps are always in front of us. So we always see where we came from. We walk backwards into the future. And so it's 1957. I'm 7 years old. I can still see the shirt I was wearing, the man from the Hawke's Bay Electric Power Board came into that house in Raupunga, connected it to electricity, and with a flick of a switch, lit up the house like daylight. So those are my footsteps as we walk, and that is going to be really the theme of what we talk about today. And I heard somebody talking here about the future, and it's really interesting. You look at people talk about the future, and they're always pointing out there. If the future was out there, it wouldn't be a problem. The future, we walk backwards, and you do it best by never losing sight of your footsteps or footsteps of others. So here's somebody. So this is a guy, Daryl Zanuck, who in 1946 was the head of the largest entertainment company in the world. And this is what he said about a new thing called a television that had just arrived on the scenes. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Didn't come true until Real Housewives of Auckland. And then there was this. Thomas Watson, the president of IBM. That is the IBM that we all know, one of the great big companies in the world. So he was president of IBM, and in 1943, this is what he said about a new invention called a computer. So, as we face the world of artificial intelligence, of changing rapidly, remember the footsteps that others have laid down. So now it's 1989. And I look out there, and here I am on a thing called a television, Philips K9, everybody remember them? A thing called a television, about to read a news story about a thing called computers.
Computer-generated pictures are increasingly part of our everyday lives, and the sort of thing that they show is on display up north in an exhibition called Ansgraph 89. John Hart reports their world is about to become our world, like it or not.
In the distant past, that is, at least 5 long years ago, computer graphics were chunky and crude. Not now. Computers today create a real-looking world, purely and simply by crunching numbers. This animated cartoon shows the entertainment possibilities of the new technology. Last year, it won an Oscar for its technical achievement. But computer cartoons are the start of a radically new billion-dollar industry that has nothing to do with entertainment. Almost anyone who hopes to make it big, now and in the future, will depend on computer-generated pictures. The ability of computers to draw and paint, and then change those drawings and paintings with lightning speed, is dazzling. They're the clearest picture, so far, of tomorrow's world. But by tomorrow, improvements in the pictures machines draw will probably show what the world will be like well into next week.
Pretty flash stuff.
I know, amazing. I said that on the news, which goes to show you can take the boy out of Ropunga, you will never take Ropunga out of the boy. So anyway, there I was. So I just read this story on the news, and I thought I'd just taken over TVNZ down there, so I started a production company making TV. And here's this thing about computers and computer graphics. I knew nothing about it. I thought, that does sound like the future. The very next week, I read a story about these 4 guys. They're from Otago University, and in 1989, they had gone to America. They were the first non-American team ever to win the World Computer Programming Champs. They beat Harvard, Caltech, MIT, Stanford. They were even awarded the World Championship in the White House. That's what they had done, and they were just down the road at Otago University. So I thought, oh, well, I better pop down and have a look, because they'll know about computers. So I went down there and I met their professor, Jeff Wyville, and I looked at the stuff they were doing. I thought, Jeff, this is amazing. If we took what your students are doing and put it with what we're doing in TV, maybe one day we'll get a job in Auckland. So we decided, absolutely on a handshake. This is how to start a business. I shook hands and we said, right, let's set up a technology company. One of the things Jeff said, and I always like to share this with you, think of how forward-thinking this was. Professor Wyville in 1989 said this to me: digital data is going to be the currency of the future, and the opportunity is turning that data into pictures that people can understand. He said that in 1989. And when I look back at the 35 years we've been in business, that is exactly what we have done. So it started in I just take that back. One of the cool things, I can just let it go. One of the cool things about starting a company, technology company, not only at the bottom of New Zealand, but at the bottom of the world, next stop, Antarctica, you simply don't know what you don't know. So you just start doing stuff. So in 1992, we changed the way the world viewed yacht racing. It wasn't long before we were doing it around the world with the Whitbread Round the World Yacht Race. I took up golf, said get me to all best golf tournaments in the world. One of our guys is a Formula One nutter, so this is what we do in sport and motorsport. Only 1 or 2 companies are allowed to do DRS and cricket. We do 3,500 games of baseball a year, and over there, that's a test we're running at the Forsyth Park Stadium. So at the next Rugby World Cup, those dickheads upstairs will get the decision right. So, and that's pretty impressive. Just imagine, there were 4 students who were at university, and they delivered that. But what is interesting, see the date of the America's Cup was 1992. So the same student, look at the date on this one. So somebody called us up and said, hey, I've got a job for United Airlines. This is in 1992. Do you think you could make it? Well, don't see why not. We'd never made one ever before. But what I liked about this commercial is the opening line.
From New Zealand, it's miles to anywhere. That's a plus.
And it is a plus. Now, for those of you who are around the decade that we made television commercials, you will recognise every one of these commercials on the screen. What you probably don't know is they were made by a group of students in Dunedin using software they made themselves because we couldn't afford the real stuff. So that's that. But wait, there's more. So, for Rio Tinto, we built the first ever online insurance assessment product. We built an air traffic control simulator that trains air traffic controllers around the world now. We invented the first real-time animated host for a TV show. These are these are things we've made for natural history units, BBC, Discovery Channel. For Whale Watch Kaikoura, we drained the Pacific Ocean. We built a VR program for teaching numeracy and literacy in prisons. Over there is Christchurch being rebuilt before it was rebuilt. In the corner is a tourist attraction we've made in Queenstown. It takes you back 90 million years to explain why they're finding dinosaur fossils there. And because we're from Dunedin, and because we could, we blew up Auckland. So, let's put that in context in the footsteps we laid down in our past. In 1989, I read a story about a group of students who went to America. I walked down the street to the university, and on a handshake, this is the result. Now, what I like to share, so 35 years we've been in business, and in 35 years I've never written a business plan. I have no idea what a business plan would look like. And if I had written one back in 1990, what on that screen would have been on it? Absolutely nothing. So we keep walking backwards into the future. But what we did decide was, oh God, actually, I think we might have a business here. We better get one of those things called a corporate mission statement, because everybody had them back then. Chase, Equity Corp, they all had them, and see how successful that was. So anyway, we decided we better have a mission statement. So we had a competition at work, which was won by our receptionist. She came up with, bugger the boxing, pour the concrete anyway. And the first word wasn't bugger. It was much shorter. So, well, it's Paddy Gower's little short word. Bugger the boxing, pour the concrete anyway. And it's interesting, we laughed then too. But as I look out at the 35 years, that is exactly the mission statement we have worked to. And that is because it comes with just 2 lessons. And again, they're lessons you only see because all your footsteps are in front of you. The first of those lessons, if you believe you've got the best team in the world and they tell you they can pour concrete without boxing, trust them. Give them all the resources they need and let them fly. And the second lesson, as I look out there, is that you can trust the technology. Because if there's no technology now to pour concrete without boxing, you can be sure it's going to turn up. And it has. They're building buildings now with 3D printing. But in our case, actually, when you go back to turning digital data into pictures, people can understand. We looked around and, what was the sport that no one could understand? The America's Cup, sailing. I mean, who could understand that? So anyway, I had a chat to the guys and said, do you think we could make sense out of this? They said, is there any digital data on the boat? Yes, there's an XY coordinate at the back. That was it. 2 positions at the back of a boat. So we went to TVNZ and said, hey, we can do all these. They said, well, no, we've checked with the Americans. You can't do that. It's not possible. So again, bugger the boxing. My team said they could do it. So in 1992, here's what the graphics looked like then. So just imagine this. This is with just an XY coordinate at the back of a boat, trusting your team and the technology. We couldn't even do this live. It was about second. It was always 10 seconds after, so it was always a replay. But at last, we were able to share a story, tell stories. So here is the story of what is going on in the water that you can't see. So you'll remember this from way back in those days. So we'll let that go. So that's what it looked like nearly 30 whatever years ago, 1992. Last year, this is what was delivered in Spain. So trust your team, and here's the cool thing about the team. The 2 guys who wrote the software in 1992 are still with me, and they wrote the software that is delivering these graphics using the latest technology in Barcelona. This is the same start sequence you just saw before, but look at the difference. So as we look out at all of these footsteps of 1992 to 2024 and see the difference that has, we walk backwards into the world of AI, supercomputing with confidence. So here's just a really good example of the stories that we tell. So they've just got a penalty and they have to clear it by 70 metres. How do they know? Well, here's our data coming in real time. There's thousands of pieces of data coming off the water now, and the judges are waiting for us to give them the indication of what's happening, and there it goes over on the right-hand side there. So watch the distance start to come up. Judges, that's how they know when the boat is 70 metres behind and the penalty is cleared. So that entire business started with an XY coordinate from the back of a boat and a team of people who said, oh, I don't see why not. And I'm just going to give you an example of where that data has taken us now. So we do 3,500 games of baseball. This is the highest paid baseball player in the world, I think. So the data we get from him now includes his limbs, his legs, his arms, the bat, the ball, the position of all the players. And here's what happens. So take a look at the two screens on the right-hand side there. There are no humans involved in that. That is data from him going to the cloud, making those avatars that are now absolutely replicating what he is doing as he runs around the baseball stadium, turning digital data into pictures, and now we don't need people. That data, we get data from 3,500 games a year, up to 15 at the same time, coming to Dunedin, and we can do stuff like that from every ball of every game in real time. And take a look at that. You can see how accurate it is. There's the guy over there, even in the right corner there. The only mistake the AI made is the guy's number is 8, and he thought it was 5, or AI. So that's, again, an example of digital data, 2 pictures, and the technology moving. So I look out at the footsteps, and now it's about 20 years ago, I think it was, maybe even longer, and I made a TV commercial for, I can't remember, Meridian, I think it was, and this is that commercial, or part of
I
it.
believe technology is nothing without the human spirit. And although we've made fantastic progress, I think our kids are going to really make things fly.
So may I now introduce you to that kid, Ben Taylor. He would sit down the back of the room, wouldn't he? So we're going to do a double act from here on in.
I often get asked what it's like to work with Dad, and this speech is a really, really good example of that. Because last night, signing off, I sent him my finished slides, and I had a quick squiz through while we were all getting set up, and I don't recognise a single one. So another thing that happens is, over time, you start to think a little bit like him. You start to do business like him, and Ian's never written a business plan. So I grew up thinking that was just completely normal. And so I actually went to the States to study business. And I remember turning up to one of my first classes. It was a management class. I'm 18 years old. I'm sitting in the back of the class, and the professor says something like, now, can anyone give me an example of strategic management? And I'm kind of looking around at all these quite preppy American college students, and no one puts their hand up. And I'm like, I know the answer to this, I've got this. And so the hand goes up, professor says, yes, Ben. And I say, is it bugger the boxing? Now you can imagine an American professor has absolutely no idea what that means. Dad often talks about how he's never written a business plan. But one of the things that I've started to notice recently is that he's always had one. He was just never given the words to describe how he felt about his business and how he felt about his people. It wasn't until quite recently Ian started to re-engage with Te Ao Māori that he actually was finally given those words he needed to articulate how he felt about those things. Words like kaupapa, your values and your beliefs. Whakapapa, where you're from, where you belong, but more importantly for us, where you fit in. And then tapawai, those footsteps. Now, they're not exclusively Māori ideas, but they are ideas that were instilled in Ian around the dinner table by his aunties back there in Roponga. And as I look at the culture that he's created and we've curated at work today, I can see those same values in Māori and Pākehā. Now, my footsteps started with this photo. I'm the little one there. That photo was taken in the same exact office that I work in today. The big one's my brother. He's a real disappointment. He's the black sheep of the family because he had no interest in computer graphics. We don't talk about him that much. He's a vascular surgeon. But back then, as Ian said, we were seek and destroy. We used to go to work, run around the office, annoy the developers, play with the things they were building and break them. and they'll tell you nothing's changed. But back then, we weren't the only ones breaking stuff. I mean, they were breaking stuff. They had to be breaking stuff. They were breaking the rules. They were breaking the mold. They started a computer graphics company from Dunedin, and that same company took on the entire world. One of the things they did was create a TV show called Squirt. And one of my earlier memories is going down into work, sneaking into the studio while they were filming and watching it. That's Katie. She's wearing a motion capture suit. It was super high tech. The team in the office used Lego to build the beak at the end there. And as she moved, the sensors in the suit would grab her movement and turn it into data. Then it would get sent through a cable into a computer, where our team would turn it back into animation. That helped people understand, be engaged, and be entertained. I remember watching that as a little kid, and I was just thinking it was magic. She would move, Spike would move on my TV screen at the exact same time. It's no wonder I'm part of a team now that tracks boats from the America's Cup in Spain, golf balls from Pebble Beach to Dubai, baseballs, 3,500 games a year across 30 stadiums, and cricket in Australia, India, Pakistan, now into the States. Those footsteps were laid down so strongly in my past that as a company we make sure we never forget them. The other part about those footsteps is who you take them with. So the team that started the company with Ian, Jeff Wyville, the professor, he now sits on our board. Paul Sharp, one of the original developers, just got back from Barcelona where he did his 10th consecutive America's Cup, dating back to 1992. So as we start to face these technological changes that are coming, and there's lots of them coming, let's make sure we don't forget that it's our people who are our most important asset. That's something that we learned again at the start of 2020. So let me set the scene for you. We just finished 2019. It was our best ever financial year. We just signed a PGA Tour contract. We're now doing all of their golf. We just signed that MLB contract. We just won the rights to do the America's Cup. And we just finished a huge R&D project in cricket. And I'm in Abu Dhabi in January 2020. First tournament of the year, it's a big one. So I booked Dad's flight to come a couple of days later so I can set up everything in peace. And I'm sitting in my hotel, and when he turns up, he has this article with him.
So just to put that in context, I've just flown up. Yeah, they used to leave me late because apparently I get in the road. I go to make the cups of tea. That's my job. But anyway, coming through Heathrow Airport on the way to Abu Dhabi, I found this article on page 6 of The Guardian. It was about a 61-year-old man who died from pneumonia in a city I'd never heard of called Wuhan. And I remember taking that picture down to the team, putting it on the table and thinking, I wonder when that's going to be on front page. We didn't have to wait. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. See, I don't do the technology. Look at that.
This way.
Oh, sorry. Well, you take over. Yeah, I'll sit down. That's where we were.
There you go.
You can go.
Okay, well, we didn't have to wait long. President Trump finally declares a state of national emergency Thursday, March the 12th, 2020. And with that declaration, he said that he is closing the borders to the states in 2 weeks' time. We immediately understood that straight away. In that same 2 weeks, we had just lost every single one of those contracts. So revenue was to zero. So we took some time, we looked at our footsteps, we remembered that it's our people who are our most important asset, and we flew everyone back to New Zealand and sent them all home. Look after yourselves, look after your families. We've got no idea how bad this is going to be, but the one thing we can guarantee is we'll pay you to the end of the year. So keep in mind this was in March, and revenue had just hit zero. So everyone went home, and we started thinking, what we're going to do next. Now, we understood as a company that COVID brought devastation to economies, to families, to healthcare systems all over the world. But from a business point of view, the COVID threat had already happened. Right now, it was about finding opportunities. And there was this this worry that these huge organisations, the PGA Tour, MLB, they have to run their events. They can't be locked down for ages. And we understood that there's a very good chance they will come back to air while we're stuck in New Zealand and can't travel. And so the idea of a remote production studio started bubbling up. Now, with that idea, the team, they caught fire. In lockdown conditions, our senior developers rebuilt their entire platform from scratch so they work in 2 places at once. Our junior devs, they reimagined how you can send data across the world instantly. This is it working. I had to lock down with Dad. This is it working from his house in Roslyn to Caversham. So that's 7.5 kilometres in Dunedin. Sure enough, during our lockdown, the PGA Tour announces they're coming back to air in June from Texas. That's 12,500 kilometres from where we were. We knew that if we sent that stuff today, it would get there on Wednesday, the day before the tournament started. But we trusted our team and we trusted the technology. We packed it up and we sent it. Then, June the 11th, 2020, the first major sports broadcast after the US lockdown came back to air. It looked like this.
Back with a bang. The American PGA Tour teeing off in Texas this morning, 3 months after it was abandoned due to coronavirus.
It's got a decent amount of help.
No fans though, but that wasn't the only difference when it came to the coverage.
Now globally connected. Now try to follow this. Using facilities across the world to bring you coverage. In Orlando at the Golf Channel headquarters are Sir Nick, Ian, and Frank. Socially distant, I might add, and in Stamford, Connecticut, mobile production trucks are connected to our facilities here in Fort Worth. Across the country in Burbank, another production studio is remotely supplying scoring graphics, top tracer cameras, and other technology. Across the world, in New Zealand, our virtual eye crew is with us live, supplying all the augmented reality technology you're accustomed to seeing on CBS Golf. It's not quite 8 in the morning Sunday in New Zealand right now.
A long way south of Texas, holed up in a Dunedin workshop, the crew doing the graphics live, something Ian Taylor's team at Animation Research had to create themselves with international travel not an option. Everything about the setup has a Kiwi touch, from the workshop only being put together yesterday to cardboard cutouts showing the time difference.
It's only 4 or 5 weeks ago we thought, gee, what if we can't get there? And in that time, this team has pulled this off.
The first 2 days of coverage will be mostly sponsorship logos, before CBS takes over the coverage where they'll introduce graphics like this.
He went after that one a little bit. You can see the ball speed up to 182. That's the fastest.
Just another way some Kiwi creativity flattened the curve in turbulent times.
This is what a broadcast looked like for us before COVID. 10, 15 people travelling, many from Dunedin to the States for 1 week and then back again. This production truck was the biggest truck of its kind at the time, and we still didn't fit in it. This is what a broadcast for us looks like now. This is in Dunedin. So our team built this studio using technology that didn't exist when they started building it, and in doing so, they shifted Dunedin from the bottom of the world to the centre of it. And that could be anywhere. It's only Dunedin because that's where we chose to live. It could be Invercargill, Christchurch, Napier, Hastings, Auckland, Whangarei. The other thing about this is the speed at which it happened. That happened in a couple of months. So those footsteps that used to get put down in a walk and then a jog, through COVID, it was a run. Now, it's a flat-out sprint.
So just going back, so we talked about turning digital data into pictures. I want to share this with you. What we decided back then was not only would we make those pictures, we would also deliver them to people how they want them, where they want them, when they want them. So that's probably the closest we get to a business plan again, but very simple. And back in those days, you only had one screen. So that's how we did it. But now the footsteps running at full speed. Here's the latest device application we've built. So this is on an Apple Vision Pro. This man is sitting in his house at home. You'll see the dog on the floor down there in a minute. And he's got full choice how they want it, where they want it, when they want it, of every camera, of every screen that's going on in the truck. He's now got it sitting in his living room at home. There he's going to watch, he's chosen to watch Scheffler tee off. There's the dog, there's Scheffler teeing off, and there's the ball being tracked on a model floating in his room. So those are the part of those footsteps, and nothing about that surprises us from the very first day we made graphics. You walk backwards into the future. Which brings me to artificial intelligence and how I buggered up all of Ben's slides. So, artificial intelligence. Warren Buffett, at his last major investment conference, this is what Warren said about artificial intelligence. He said it was already out of the box and it can change everything in the world except how we think and behave. Now, he's still trying to decide what happens with it. But the interesting thing about that quote was it wasn't original. He'd taken it from Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein said that in the 1940s, I think 46, when they decided to test an atomic bomb. Now, the reason he said that was there wasn't a scientist in the world who could guarantee that if they pushed the button on the atomic bomb, it wouldn't start a chain reaction that would wipe out every living thing on the planet, but they pushed it anyway. The way we think and behave as humans, which explains this graph quite well, I reckon. Have you ever noticed, searching for human intelligence life are all pointed away from Earth. But the interesting thing about that was that is humans, because there was a race. So the Americans believed if they didn't do it, the Germans would do it, or the Russians would do it, or the Chinese would do it. So the race was on, and they pushed the button regardless. And that is the same with artificial intelligence, and we'll touch on some of that. But today the race isn't governments. It is the mega technology companies. It is Mark Zuckerberg. It is Elon Musk. It is the control has been shifted. They've pushed the go button, and the race is on. Ben?
Has anyone got teenagers here? Teenage kids? I've got three kids. My teenager is 16. Her name's Lola. So I saw this happen firsthand. The rise of TikTok to 100 million users in just 9 months. I remember waking up and all of a sudden I'm a boomer for using Instagram. Since that point, I've been hiding my LinkedIn profile so she can't see that. But OpenAI comes along and hits that same milestone in 2 months. Right, so we're getting to a point now where half of the developed world has used generative AI. But of them, half of them have not used it twice. So that's unbelievable reach, but it's not yet traction. So I don't think we're alone here in New Zealand as we're still grappling with how to use these tools in our lives, in our businesses, in our communities, in our schools, and in our country. But the one thing that I can guarantee you is that this is not a technology that is going to wait for us.
If someone did nothing but read 24 hours a day for their entire life, they'd consume 8 billion words. And of course, that's a lot of words. But today, the most advanced AIs consume more than 8 trillion words in a single month of training. And all of this is set to continue. The long arc of technological history is now in an extraordinary new phase.
So these models are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. They're reading more and more. And unlike us, they're never going to forget a single word. So what are people doing with these models? Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, he used it to create this AI version of himself.
Why would I want to be interviewed by a digital version of myself? Well, great question. Reid AI, introduce yourself to everyone.
Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm an AI-generated version of Reid Hoffman, his digital twin. My thinking and everything I am saying comes from a custom GPT that is based on 20 years of Reid talking and making content. So I've read all his books, watched his speeches, and listened to his podcasts. I think it gives me a pretty good sense of how you approach the world, Reid.
So first, I'm going to challenge Reid AI with some questions to see what it can do and how good its content is in mirroring what I might say.
Well, okay, challenge accepted.
Let's get started. Let's take a real piece of work from me, blitzscaling. I wrote a 336-page book, and how do you explain it in one sentence? To a smart person, to a 5-year-old, well, for the Star Trek fans, in Klingon, and as Jerry would explain it in Seinfeld.
Okay, condensing your entire strategy from a 336-page book into one sentence, and starting with the explanation for the smartest person in the world. Blitzscaling is a strategic acceleration of organizational growth to seize market dominance by prioritizing rapid expansion over efficiency, leveraging capital and network effects to outpace competitors in winner-takes-all markets, despite the attendant risks to scalability and operational stability. Now, for a 5-year-old, blitzscaling is like building the biggest tower super fast before anyone else, even if it gets a bit messy, so you can be the leader of the tower game. And now for a Klingon, blitzscaling pus vittelheg duj luchar glutavistelhab e dochvam viol, hoc competition vipo q a market dahara. And finally, like Jerry, in a Seinfeld episode, blitzscaling, you know, it's when a company decides to floor it on the highway of business, ignoring the speed limit, racing to be the first to that big golden market share in the sky, all while hoping they don't run out of gas or, you know, hit a tree. It's like, who cares if we're burning cash like it's a bonfire? We're getting to the front of the line, baby. Efficiency? Please, that's for those in the slow lane watching us fly by.
So that's a computer-generated AI. That is the worst it's ever going to be and the most expensive it's going to be. You had an idea about education, Ben. You know, how we could use it in education.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if every single child in our education system had access to a model like that, but it was Albert Einstein to teach them physics. Or
John Lennon.
Yeah, you know, Beethoven for music, Sigmund Freud, psychology. Imagine learning poetry from Emily Dickinson. Imagine if those 4 or 5 people had never died, and you could add today's understanding of the world and the arts to their comprehension.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. One of the debates we're having now is structured numeracy and what we're teaching in schools. But are we asking the right question? We should, I don't know the answer, but we should at least be asking, do we actually need to learn to read and write? That is a question that has to be asked as you start to look at all of these. But the big question that is not being asked is, what are the jobs of the future? So you got an example there, Ben?
So, one of the more difficult tasks you can give a computer is the Rubik's Cube, right? So the Rubik's Cube has 43 quintillion possible combinations. It looks like that. It's 18 zeros. If you spent 1 second on each configuration, it would take you longer than the complete age of the known universe to get through all of those combinations. This is the fastest in the world. So he does that in 3.134 seconds. 10 years ago, it took a robot 3.25 seconds to do that. 5 years ago, under a second. From May last year, right, so here's the kicker. That was at a competition. Every single team got 30 minutes to set their fastest time. When this team set this time, the first time that they tried it, they broke the arm on the robot. It was too fast, it was too complex. But within that same 30 minutes, that team of scientists went in. Not only did they repair the arm, but they fixed the software, allowing it to set the fastest time in the world for a Rubik's Cube. And when I hear that, I think that is a telescope straight into the future. That's what jobs will look like. They will be jobs where we use the power of these tools with humanity to solve our core problems. And you hear all the time, AI is going to take your jobs, or people who know how to use AI are going to take your jobs. Well, the good news is AI is incredibly easy to use. You do not need a huge technological skill set. You need 2 things. You need judgment, and you need industry knowledge. I think we're going to start to see this trend towards the more technical studies, reverse back to the arts. People will need interpersonal skills. CEOs won't just need to tell people how to do things, they will be aligning people with common purpose towards a goal. The most successful people and companies in this new phase of technology will be ones who figure out how to use these tools to amplify humanity, not to replace it. So if we look to Barcelona last year, the America's Cup, the technology has come so far, it allows us to draw all of our graphics over live pictures out of a drone or a helicopter. So using that technology, we created a canvas upon which we can paint. And because we are storytellers, we use that canvas to tell the stories of Peter Burling and the rest of these amazing athletes moving these amazing machines around the ocean. But equally, the events themselves can use that same canvas to sell sponsorship, generating hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue every single year for the events, for the teams, the athletes, the broadcasters, for the economies of the cities that host those events. And I reckon if anyone else but Ian Taylor had written our contract, we would have seen some of that as well.
And just on that, released probably this morning, coming tomorrow morning at 3 o'clock, you will see the financial return of the America's Cup to Barcelona, and it is remarkable.
This is how we need to be thinking as a country about technology, healthcare, education, agriculture. In Australia, we've got 12 cameras at every single stadium. And those cameras, they track every ball, they track the bat, the ball off the bat, and the limbs of all the players. And they track that going back 10 years. Now we compare that with the results, how many runs each team player got, the wickets, and we can start to pull out stories. Now those stories can be used for betting, injury prevention, performance analysis, recruitment. Again, we choose to use that to tell stories, to highlight why these athletes are so good. This is from the summer just gone.
You just look here, his run up there, he's at 19 kilometres an hour, so that's quite slow. You just look at his coil there, his movement with the ball in hand. So our cameras have been able to monitor his wrist, his elbow, and the ball.
No one could figure out why Bumrah was so successful in Australia. Why was he cleaning up all these Aussie batters? The batters would always come in and they would say it's super uncomfortable to face him. The commentators couldn't even figure out or didn't know how to tell that story. We found this piece, a comparison.
Well, this is going to show it here.
Yeah, here's the comparison. So he's pretty slow out of the gates, Bumrah, but he makes up for it with his catapult type action. But his release point, all the batsmen say they've got less time when they're facing him, and that's because his release point, you can see where he's releasing there.
But just look at the suplex at the top of Jasprit Bumrah, you know, the hyperextension that we keep talking about. You've got Pat Cummins that's absolutely straight with his arm, and that kind of hyperextension from Bumrah is generating all that power.
Like a catapult.
Yeah, and that's why he's releasing the ball with 58 kilometres per hour out of the release of the hand.
At every single point through his bowling action, he is slower than everyone else, except for when that ball is released from his hand. It was the team collectively who came up with that idea, but it was AI and machine learning that helped us tell that story. When I was 13 years old, I had the privilege of walking the fairways with some of golfing greats, Tiger Woods, Ernie Els. And with that backpack, I could walk up to a ball and I could collect a single XY coordinate, the final position of the ball, similar to those boats of '92. I don't need to do that role anymore, because at every single PGA Tour event, there's 160 cameras rigged around the course. And at any moment in a PGA Tour event, there's 14 balls in motion. Those cameras collect every bit of data for those balls. They get the club speed, the ball speed, the launch angle and direction, carry, curve, landing angle, rollout, and final position. They measure the spin on the ball and the axis that it's spinning. So that role has been automated. Many roles will be, but I've been shifted into a position where I can create more value. Now I can use that data, which is more timely, more accurate, more complete, and I can inject it with the human spirit and use it to tell stories and animations to help people understand, be educated, and be entertained, just like we did with Spike the Penguin all those years ago.
So that's an example of where that had all come, and that's the idea of bringing that humanity, using the tools to tell stories, to go into another space. Now, just on the whole thing of footsteps we laid down in the past, I remember I said there are footsteps of others that you should see. So in 1990, when we decided we'd set up a technology company in Dunedin, the bottom of the world, and we were never leaving there, we're going to take on the world from there, we had no idea how we were going to do that. But looking out at those footsteps, that very same year, 1990, this man, Tim Berners-Lee, invented a thing called the World Wide Web. He created the electronic highway that allows us to do everything we're doing today from the bottom of the world. So again, embrace ko ngā tahua o tapua I nanahi, hei tu ira ora mo opopo. The footsteps laid down in our past create the paving stones of where we stand today. Now, I was going to go somewhere else, and it was really interesting listening to that last panel about insurance and climate change, and because I was going somewhere else. In 1990, not only did we start our company, but, and I'm just going to touch this quickly because I've thrown it all out, but I'll give you this a little bit. So did you know, 1990, when we started our company, the GDPs of Ireland and New Zealand were almost identical. What I was going to talk about, populations are the same. There's our GDPs in 2022. It's now 600 million versus about 270 billion. No one in the government is talking about GDP. No one is talking about what did Ireland to do in the time we've been in business to go from there to there. But that's another story. And actually listening to them talk today, the answers are already here. So I need to grab that panel and we will take them and show them how climate change and sustainability will be the driver of the economic engine that will lift GDP. You know, you do insurance for that, all that shit that comes out of the trees when that floods happen? Well, let me tell you about that. Those trees, biodiversity, God, I'm going to use up some time, but I've got to tell you this. Bioforestry is the most enormous opportunity for this country. One of a number, there's 3 or 4. We call it tomorrow's economy. Now those logs, that stuff that whips down and destroys bridges, destroys houses, and you have to pay out all that insurance, if you were investing instead in New Zealand bioforestry, I'll give you an example. That stuff that lies on the ground, I have a little bottle. It's a bottle about that big. It is DNA approved, it's whatever that is in America, approved for dementia. It's a bottle that big, and 2 of those bottles on a per tonnage basis are worth more than a log of trucks. There are so many things. The value in bioforestry, that stuff that we leave rolling out to sea causing damage, is actually been predicted between $18 and $30 billion a year that we leave lying on the ground. So those are the discussions we need to be having, and we need to be having them fast because we need to pick the GDP up, because 7% of GDP in Ireland for education for the same number of students is more than twice as much that we spend. So that was a different discussion. But then Ben did something in the taxi. He turned up and he said, you know, Dad, you know this AI stuff, I've just written an AI engine for that, school platform that you've done. So let me give you background on the school platform. Because people used to ask me, you know, you're a little fella from Ropunga, Māori fella, says you know nothing about tech, so how come you're doing all this stuff? And my answer was simple, I just surrounded myself with really clever white people. And you know, for a very long time I believed that, and there was like, you know, of course, they're all clever, these white people, and I've got them working beside me. And then I heard a lecture by this Canadian professor from Africa to Aotearoa, Professor Lisa Matteso-Smith. She used DNA to study the history of human migration from 80,000 years ago, the first footsteps of humankind out of Africa, and she called it From Africa to Aotearoa because her finding was that the Polynesian navigation around the Pacific is truly one of the greatest feats in human history. I listened to that lecture and I realized that our strength was, again, those footsteps we laid down in our past. I was 74 or whatever it was when I first heard that story. I never heard it at school. So we decided we'd make a platform for schools. It's called mātauranga.co.nz, and it takes this to say to our kids, this thing called STEM, this thing called innovation, it's in your DNA. And we use it to discover mātauranga around them. So here's our mission, here's the engaging videos, and here's technology. You get the idea. So this platform is free to everyone, and we put it out there, and it's being used by schools, and then bugger me days, the government turns up and says, right, that's not important anymore, we're going to do structured numeracy and literacy. Oh, thanks for that. But that's where I bring back Ben now. So driving in from the airport, he said, I've written an AI engine, and you know that thing about your mātauranga, and what if I've just built you an engine in 10 minutes that will write lesson plans for all the teachers using your site. So we'll just go in here. So now this is happening live. What are you writing, Ben?
Can you please make me a lesson plan for my students? I don't know why I say please, but it's a habit.
You do, you say please and thank you. So watch what it's doing here. This is live. What did you say?
It asked me for an age, so I said 7 years old.
So this is doing this in real time. And it's doing it from our website. So it knows our website's in there. Theme, how did the Polynesians navigate to Aotearoa? Here's what you'll need. Here's your first 10-minute plan. Here's this. This is being written now for teachers. So, and that's just the first one. So Ben, next lesson, so can we interrupt it now and ask, what if I had a dyslexic student in the class? What would I do? So can you put...
Yeah, it's thinking.
Oh, probably the internet.
Let me just...
Isn't that always the case?
Here we go.
I have a dyslexic student.
Yep.
God, he could spell it. And it actually doesn't matter if he can spell or not, it does all this. But this is just to give you an idea. So, it's rewriting the whole thing, and it's going to come up with things for dyslexic, audiobooks, story. So, whatever you've got in your classroom, you can alter and change. So you can make it for 7-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 9-year-olds. We've got another one. Part of the thing is about Team New Zealand's falling monohull. That's part of the series, saying these are the footsteps from our waka haurua to our. Now the teacher can sit in there and go, what is the physics behind using your legs to cycle a site and your bike? And so suddenly the kids are engaged at 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, whatever it is. They've got all of that happening for them. So we could go on for ages, and I'd love to have been able to spend an hour about tomorrow's economy as well, about the future for this country. But one of the things, it's funny, I just heard that the Prime Minister had just come out with this thing called the Coalition of the Willing in England to support Zelensky. Well, I formed a group called the Coalition of the Willing, and it's a loose gathering. And I want to leave you with this thought. But it's a loose gathering of people out there. And, when you form a company, its most important thing is, you understand your why. Everyone has to share the why you are doing something. So the only thing you need to understand if you're going to join our Coalition of the Willing, and you can, because it's a way of thinking. Our Coalition of the Why, the only thing you have to think about is our mokopuna, our grandchildren. Every day, even if you don't have them, you can imagine what that's going to be like. Every day, I need to be able to look at my moko in the eye and say, today, I did something. That will make a difference. That's what the government needs to do. That's what we need to do as a country. We need to be thinking intergenerationally, not these short let's have another, what do you call those think groups that get together and write reports and do something before 10 years gone. And another lot of kids have gone. So we need to be the Coalition of the Willing. Now, I'm going to share with you, just so that we can get you out to lunch on time, my moko, one of my moko, happens to be his son. His name is Franco. Now, when Franco was born, I went to see him and he had the most beautiful blue eyes. Now, we didn't say at the top, but my first job ever was as a singer in a rock and roll band. So, take everything you heard today in that context. He was a bloody singer in a band. and a presenter on Play School. But anyway, I walked in there and I looked at the most beautiful blue eyes, and out came the singer. Don't it make my brown eyes, don't it make my brown eyes, don't it make my brown eyes blue? And he loved it. He just loved it. So every time I went round to see him, don't it make my brown eyes. And as he grew up, Ben and Sammy, they teach the kids sign language so they don't get frustrated before they've got words. So now he's got sign language for more. Here he is. No more. Don't it make my brown eyes. Don't it make my brown eyes. Don't it make my brown eyes blue. More. So, in the context of the footsteps we've laid down, Franco is 4. So he's laid down 4 years of footsteps. And somewhere in those 4 years of his footsteps is his silly koro, his silly grandfather singing him Brown Eyes. Now, his mother sent me this video a year or so ago, 6 months ago, and here is Franco. He's just had a bath. He's on his way up to his bedroom. He is totally in a world of his own. And those footsteps from his silly grandfather come back to him.
Don't you let my brown eyes. Don't you let my brown eyes. Don't you let my brown eyes. Yeah.
He's even got the turn with the blues. So the coalition of the willing, our grandchildren, that's what we have to be thinking about. That's what we have to be doing. And if I had that big thing, what you can take away from here, and we can have a different discussion about this, but the future for this country to lead the world is climate change and sustainability, and we can do it from here. And our people, our farmers, and our scientists are doing it now. We just need people to listen and make the moves. And for people who think it's going to be too hard, I'll leave you. We'll go back to golf and our mate Jack Nicklaus and look at his final words.
What do you? There's no chance putting it.
Why? You said a good putt.
There's no
Want me to
chance.
show you how to putt it?
You can't. There you go. Yeah, show me how to do it.
You don't hear his last words, but I've put them on the screen for you. So when people tell you things can't be done,
Going in, bounce that high. What's so hard about that?
what's so hard about that? So we opened with a whakatauki. I'd just like to ask Ben to close with a small karakia.
Hei whakakapi aki, kia whakairihiranga ki te kōrero ki te tāhuhu o te whare. Kia turuturu whakamaua, kia tīna, tīna. Homie, huie,
Tā iki e.
Let us suspend the baskets of learning upon the ridgepole of the house, bring it together so it's firm, bring it together, bind it, it is done. Kia ora.
Thank you.